Hey guys, Suz here, back with some easy keto meals to make at home. These low carb dinner ideas are perfect for keto weeknight dinners. If you're new here, go ahead and hit that subscribe button and join the crew. We make weekly keto cooking videos to give you a little motivation and inspiration to get in the kitchen and get your keto meal prep on. Let's go ahead and get into the video. First up this week, we made some skillet brown chicken with creamy spinach. I will link the original recipe below, but just know I did adapt it a little bit. So to start with, over medium-high heat to a large skillet, I'm adding a couple tablespoons of coconut oil. Here I have some chicken thighs, just 4 bone-in, skin-on thighs. I have salt and peppered them on each side, and once our oil is hot, we're gonna add these to the pan and fry them up. I'm going to fry them for about 5 minutes on each side to get started. While those are cooking, we're gonna get started on our cream sauce. On the back burner over medium heat, I'm adding a couple tablespoons of butter. Once that's melted, adding in 2 tablespoons of coconut flour and whisking that together until it forms a paste. To that, I'm going to pour in 1 cup of heavy whipping cream and continue mixing that in until it's nice and smooth. Gonna go ahead and bring this up to a boil and then turn it down to let it simmer and thicken while we work on our chicken thighs. Flipping these over, you can see they're starting to get nice and brown. As I said, we are gonna fry these on both sides for about 5 minutes, and then I'm just gonna kind of flip them back and forth until they get all the way cooked to temperature. Getting back to our cream sauce, now that it has started to thicken a little, I'm adding in a teaspoon of dried Italian herbs and just mixing that in. I'm gonna go ahead and turn the heat off on this. Now getting back to our chicken, see those are getting nice and dark. I'm just gonna continue flipping these back and forth until the internal temperature is about 165, and I will use a meat thermometer to check that. After they're cooked all the way through, I'm just taking some tongs. I'm gonna remove these chicken thighs to this little metal dish while we go ahead and work on our spinach. Now in this original recipe, I was trying to follow it as closely as possible. They do recommend using 1 cup of chicken stock, chicken broth, to deglaze the pan after you pull your chicken out. As you can see here, I have a good bit of oil and liquid still in my pan, so I did not need all of that. If you make this at home, I would recommend cutting that in half and only using a half a cup of chicken broth to deglaze. But anyway, we went ahead with the 1 cup. We're whisking that in, scraping the bits off the bottom. You can already see it getting a little creamy here just from the fried chicken bits that were on the bottom of the pan. I am working just over medium heat here, and once I feel like I've got that all sufficiently mixed in, I'm just gonna add that cream sauce we made straight to the pan and whisking that all together until it's combined really well. To that, I'm adding a 5-ounce container of baby spinach, and I am just gonna use my spatula to kind of poke that in and stir it around so that I can make sure all of my spinach is coated with the cream sauce. And once it is, I am bringing it up to a slight boil, and then I'm just gonna turn the heat down a little and let this simmer and cook. I probably did for about 20 minutes to let some of those liquids just continue to reduce so my sauce could thicken up before adding my chicken thighs back to the pan to just make sure those were heated all the way through. My husband absolutely loved this dish and thought it would be great with like cut up or shredded chicken. If I make it again, I probably will do it that way, as I don't like chicken thighs, but he does. So I had some in the freezer and wanted a good recipe to use for these, and this one totally fit the bill. This was really good and pretty quick for a weeknight meal. Next up, we have this low carb goulash. Again, I'll link the original recipe down below. I did decrease some of the onion and stuff in this recipe to lower the carbs a little bit more. So to start with, I took a pound of ground beef and just over medium-high heat, I am breaking that apart with my meat chopper upper. I always have linked in the description box. Once it's halfway browned, I'm adding a half a cup of chopped up onion and 1 teaspoon of minced garlic, working that in with the meat chopper upper. And then I have some Rayo's marinara sauce here. I'd already used a half a cup out of it, so it's 24 ounces I'm adding to the pot and stirring that in really well. To that, I'm also adding 1 cup of beef broth, as well as 3 medium zucchini that I just chopped up into half-moon chunks. And I did leave these thick enough so that after they cook in the sauce, they still have a little bit of a firm texture to them, as I don't really like mushy zucchini. To that, I'm adding 1 tablespoon of soy sauce as well as 1 tablespoon of Italian seasoning. And they called for seasoning salt, but the second ingredient in that is sugar. So I'm using this Creole seasoning instead, which has salt included in it, and just adding 1 teaspoon of that. Now mixing from the bottom, I'm stirring this all in until it's nice and combined. Adding 1 bay leaf, and I'm just gonna push that down into our sauce so it can flavor the whole pot while it's cooking. Bringing it up to a boil, giving it 1 final stir before popping a lid on this and turning the heat down and letting it simmer for about 20 minutes. And after it does, we're just gonna fish that little bay leaf out. Go ahead and remove it. Although I do like to leave those in there when I store it, just to keep giving it more flavor, we'll remove it. And here it is plated up. I did just top this with a little shredded Italian blend cheeses. This was excellent. Just straight keto comfort food. Super easy. I mean, chopping the vegetables is about the hardest part of making this recipe. Definitely recommend it. And even when I heated it up the next day, my zucchini still kept a firm enough texture left over. So definitely try this one out. Next up, this is such an interesting recipe. It's a turmeric chicken soup. I really think it should have like lemon and cilantro in the name because that is more so the flavor that you get from it. Just the perfect keto chicken soup to make, especially if you're sick. There's lemon flavors in it. So to start with, I'm using a Dutch oven, just an enamel coated cast iron one. You could just use a large pot if you wanted to. But over medium heat, I'm adding 1/4 cup of ghee. You could totally use oil or butter if you preferred. And for this recipe, it called for a whole small onion, but I'm just doing 1 cup of onion that I diced up. To that, I am adding 2 teaspoons of minced garlic. And then I'm adding some jalapeno. Now the recipe called for 1 whole jalapeno chopped up. I just used about 10 jarred little slices of jalapeno and put them in my little food processor and minced those. And I'm just adding that. I was not trying to mess around with getting my fingers all burned up messing with jalapenos. To this, I'm adding 2 tablespoons of grated ginger. And this is just some that I had in the freezer. And the recipe also called for 2 tablespoons of fresh turmeric, and I didn't have that, so I used 1/2 teaspoon of ground turmeric instead, as well as about 1/4 to 1/3 of a cup of chopped cilantro. They called for a whole bunch, but we just went with this and it was excellent. Stirring that all around and cooking it down for about 5 minutes before adding 1 teaspoon of ground coriander and 1 teaspoon of paprika. Giving that a good stir, maybe cooking it another minute before adding in 2 tablespoons of apple cider vinegar. And then I'm adding in some chicken broth, 8 cups, 64 ounces. I just did 2 of the 32-ounce cartons. And I did go ahead and use regular. I know most of the time, if you guys watch my videos, I cook with low sodium broth. For this recipe, I went ahead and used the full salted up broth. And on top of that, I also added 1/4 of a teaspoon sea salt, as well as just a little bit of ground black pepper. And I'm gonna stir this all in. Now I'm adding 1 really large chicken breast. It calls for 1 pound of chicken. You could add more to that if you wanted. I just used just shy of 1 pound. And I'm taking 1 lemon that I sliced up here pretty thinly, and I went ahead and tried to pop all of the seeds out that I could, adding that to the pot as well. I'm going to bring up this whole mixture to a boil, stick a lid on it, turn the heat down, and let it cook about 25 minutes. Almost grabbed that handle with my hand. Be careful with cast iron. Now, removing the lid from that, we're just going to stir this around a little bit. Go ahead and fish our chicken breast out of the pot. Just going to put this in a separate dish. Use my hand mixer to shred that up super quick. If you don't shred your chicken that way, I highly recommend it. Adding all of our shredded chicken back into the pot and giving it a final good stir before we plate it up. Now, this was such an interesting recipe. I'll definitely be making it again, and I do want to try making it with the fresh ground turmeric next time I make it. I think this would be a perfect keto chicken soup recipe for when you're sick. I love like the combination of flavors in it. It's got a little spice, the cilantro, the turmeric, the onion, the lemon. It's the first couple of spoonfuls were tart, and I was like, oh no, this might not be for me. But the more you eat it, the better it tastes. I don't know, I can't describe it. If you don't like lemons, I definitely would not make this recipe, but if you do, try it out. Next up, lastly this week, I wanted to try out this keto Carolina style barbecue mustard sauce recipe that I found. So I actually cooked up a whole Boston butt. This is about an 8-pound Boston butt here. I went ahead and salted it, put some pepper on it. I'm putting it into a big crock pot, fat side down. I normally would only cook one about half this size, but this is bone in and we had frozen the whole thing. So I'm just gonna cook the whole thing up, use half of it for this recipe. So I'm putting this on the night before, cooking it on low for 8 hours. And then in the morning when I get up, I'll go ahead and flip it over, put the fat side on top and cook it on high for another 4 hours. And then half of it I'll use for a future recipe and to feed the kids. And then the other half I will put the sauce we're gonna make on it. And here it is after we've cooked it for that full 12 hours. As I said, 8 hours on low and about 4 hours on high. And as you can see, the meat has totally fallen off the bone. I'm gonna go ahead and use a slotted spoon to scoop out any big chunks of fat, as well as go ahead and scoop that bone out. Now this is a nice bone to save to make broth, so I'm gonna stick it in a freezer bag, pop it in the freezer, and use it in the future to make bone broth. Stirring this all around, you can see it's nice and shredded. We're gonna go ahead to the stove top and get started on our sauce. So for that, I'm taking just a small saucepan and adding 3/4 of a cup of just regular yellow mustard to that, along with a 1/4 of a cup of confectioner's erythritol. I'm using Swerve. I'm working over medium heat and just whisking that together until it's nice and combined. To that, I'm adding a 1/4 of a cup of apple cider vinegar, and really that's the key ingredients for this sauce, mustard and vinegar. Whisking that together some, I like to mix it as I go. Adding in 1 teaspoon of tomato paste and working that into the sauce mixture as well. 1 teaspoon of Worcestershire sauce, along with 1 teaspoon of sea salt, 1/2 teaspoon minced garlic, 1 teaspoon smoky paprika, and it called for 4 to 5 dashes Tabasco. Instead, I'm putting in 1/2 teaspoon of Louisiana hot sauce, along with 1/4 teaspoon of ground cayenne pepper. And I'm just going to whisk this up really, really well until everything is nice and combined and smooth and heated all the way through. And then I'm just going to cut the heat off on that and stick it to the side. Now over here in a large baking sheet, I've lined it with nonstick foil. I have about half of our pork on here, I'd say about 4 pounds. And I'm just going to dump that whole batch of sauce on top of this. And I am using this slotted spoon to mix this together, but really some tongs would make this quite an easier job to do. But after I have it all mixed up together really well and all of our pork is covered in the sauce, I'm gonna pop this under a broiler for 10 minutes. You could do it a little longer, but I didn't feel like standing there and watching it any longer. Here it is when it comes out. I just wanted to crisp it up a little. This is so delicious. Obviously this stores really well in the refrigerator and is perfect for doing a keto meal prep for the week. Here it is plated up. I served it with over a little bit of cauliflower rice, but this would be great by itself or on chaffles. Takes a long time to cook it in the crock pot, but it's super, super easy and well worth it. And again, I'll link the original recipe for that sauce down below. It was awesome. I hope you enjoyed this week's easy keto meals that you can make at home, things to get you through the week. I hope these low carb dinner ideas gave you a little inspiration to get in the kitchen and get your keto cooking on. As always, if you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. Please share it with any of your friends who are trying to follow a keto diet or live a low carb lifestyle. The more eyeballs that are on our video, the more it encourages me to keep making them every single week. Make sure you're subscribed so you never miss one of those, and comment any recipes you'd like to see us tackle down below. Until next time, bye guys.